Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another planty video. My name is Shannon and this is Planted 386. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. I know there is a plethora of content surrounding plants out on YouTube already, so I definitely don't take it lightly that you decided to spend some time with me today, and I really appreciate it. If you're returning, thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your support. I absolutely adore the community over here on YouTube. I do have TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, but of all the platforms, I really have found YouTube to be just the most friendliest, the most welcoming, and the most supportive. So I have definitely been enjoying my time on the platform. And so yeah, if you're interested in planty content, if you are new to houseplants, or perhaps you've been in the game for a while, like I said, I upload all over the internet, and so I hope you will consider subscribing and liking and sharing and all the things. And without further ado, let's get into today's video. I just uploaded in my last video my top 10 plants for beginners in my collection and my experience caring for these plants. So if you're more interested on which house plants to purchase, maybe that might be a better video. But if you are interested in just general care tips and things that you can do to better care for your houseplants overall, then this is the video for you. We won't be showing any plants today. It's not going to be about that. It's just basically me talking to you as perhaps a new beginner plant parent, and I hope that you will find this video helpful in your journey caring for your plants. So tip number one is repotting after purchase. I know this is controversial, and a lot of advice will probably tell you to do the exact opposite. You'll probably see a lot of advice along the lines of, bring your plant home, allow it to acclimate, just kind of set it and forget it. And maybe that works for the mass majority, but for me personally, I have found that when I would do that, and this is more so in my early days before I guess I knew better, I would follow that advice, and oftentimes the plant would decline pretty quickly after getting it home. And what I kind of realized is everybody's watering habits are different, and a lot of times these plants are placed in a mixture, or a soil mixture, or just a substrate in general that's going to be best suited for the big box retailer, or even in a nursery setting when there's thousands of plants that need to be cared for. They don't really have time to sort of water here, water there. So I think when they are mass producing plants and they're sending them out, they are putting them in a substrate that's going to best suit those conditions. However, when you bring them home into your care, if you're someone like me who tends to be a bit of an overwaterer, these substrates, oftentimes consisting of heavy peat moss or just very dense indoor potting mixes, tended to, I would basically suffocate my plants by overwatering them, because I did not realize at that time that substrate is so important. What you put your plant in is one of the most important things, at least in my experience. This sort of leads me to my next point, which is making your soil work for you, or your substrate work for you. So for example, me personally, I tend to be an overwaterer. So when I am mixing my soil batches, I tend to make them a bit more on the chunky side, just a little bit more aeration. I may add more perlite. Sometimes I even add pond to my soil mixtures or my semi-hydro substrate, just to add aeration, because for me, I enjoy watering. I know not everyone does, but it is the time that I get sort of to myself to kind of recollect my thoughts. It's kind of my downtime. And I also find that when watering your plants, you are you're able to really take a look at them and sort of spend time with that plant, and that leads to potentially finding other issues that could be going on. But for me, I personally enjoy watering once a week. And so I try to make my substrate stretch for that week period. I hope I'm making sense. I have found that plants in my care, they don't like to go bone dry. I don't think any plant really likes to go bone dry. I think that is a common misused word or term in the hobby. If you think about plants in their natural habitat, or even when I think about my days as a teenager working in a plant nursery, the plants got watered every single day to some degree. Even in nature, if there is no rain daily, there's still condensation, there's still humidity, there's still dew in the air, and the plants are able to absorb that. So in your home conditions, chances are they're not getting that same level of humidity or moisture that they would naturally get in their normal habitat. So I try to ensure that the plants never go bone dry. And for me, making my soil work for me and last for the week that will be in between my waterings seems to be what has worked out best for my plants. My third tip is to research the plant before you buy it. Perhaps make a wish list. Perhaps go on to Instagram or Google, whatever place you want to perhaps look at your next potential plant purchase. And once you decide what plant you're interested in, I would say do some research on it. So, for example, I have a wish list. Maybe someday I'll do a video on my planty wish list. But before actually purchasing said plant off that wish list, I will do some research on it. Now, this has not always been the case. I have definitely learned my lesson. For example, at one point in time, I had a philodendron on my wish list. It was Ilsamania, I believe, and I ended up crossing it off because I realized that that plant's growth pattern doesn't suit my personal plant preferences. It likes to climb, it's particular about its conditions, its variegation isn't always stable. There was many factors that I didn't take into consideration upon looking at that photograph that I saw of the plant, which is what coerced me to put it on my wish list. So after doing that bit of research, I just realized that while I think the plant is stunning, it's best I appreciate it from a photograph or perhaps in someone else's collection, because for me personally, I am not interested in any more like climbing plants. I almost said trailing. Climbing plants that I'm going to have to mount to a moss pole or some kind of support system, if that makes sense. This leads me to tip number 4, which is, as hard as it is in the beginning, try not to buy all the plants. So when I first got started, I just remember being so excited. It was like this whole new world that I had delved into, and anytime we would go to Lowe's or Home Depot, really anywhere that there was a plant possibly in the area, I was just like fixated. Let's go look at the plants. I want to see the plants. And every single time I would buy a plant, which led to a lot of plants at one time. And when you take on a lot of plants at one time, it's not just about them looking pretty for the moment. Like, you actually have to care for these plants once you get them into your home. So taking on a lot at one time can be overwhelming, especially if you're not really prepared for the care part of it. Also, I was taking on so many different genus at one time. It was like, we'll get a pothos this time, and then I'll get an alocasia this time, and then I'll get a scindapsus this time, and then I'll get a philodendron this time. And the thing about that is each of those plants has a different care requirement and just different needs. different growth patterns, all of the things. So you don't really think about that when you are first beginning into plants, at least not for me. I think you're just so overwhelmed by the possibilities and just, I don't know, I just remember being so excited about everything. And not that I'm not excited about it now, it's just, I would say that I have a better understanding of my preferences, my personal planty preferences. There's just certain genus that I know now aren't for me, and that's okay. I don't have to collect them all. I can admire them from someone else's collection. So I think that's just something to really keep in mind in the beginning when you're probably feeling super excited and all the things. Just try to rein it in. Try to rein it in. It's going to be better for you. It's going to be better for the plants. It's going to help you curate your collection much sooner than having to waste money, time, and effort only to realize that these certain plants don't work for you, and then having to figure out how to rehome them or and then there's a level of guilt that comes with that too, right? Because you spent money on them, you spent time on them, and they're just not like checking your boxes anymore. And then of course, you know, it's a living thing. You don't want to see it suffer. So proceed with caution, you know? This leads me to tip number 5, which is get to know your plants. Take your time. Get to know what each plant likes and what it doesn't like. This is definitely going to help you care for your plants. This may sound silly, but your plants speak to you. They will tell you what they need. They will tell you what they like. They will tell you what they don't like if you take the time to observe what they are trying to tell you. This is gonna maybe sound, I don't know, make me sound a little, I don't know, guys. I just know that I can look at almost any single plant in my collection and I can tell you what it likes and what it doesn't like just because I've taken the time to understand it. The only way that you can really get to know your plants is time, is patience, and hands-on, one-on-one experiences with said plant. So this will help you care for your plants overall in the sense that you could potentially look at your Rhipsalis and say, wow, my Anthurium here is thirsty, it's time for a drink, but this guy, he's fine, I'm gonna pass. And this kind of helps with watering, this helps with even pest care. I know, for example, with Anthurium, the emergent leaves in my care are very susceptible to spider mites, but not necessarily the mature leaves. So I know that when I have an emergent Anthurium leaf happening in my collection, to keep an eye on it, to keep it sprayed, to monitor its progress, if you will. So listen to your plants. They will talk to you. Number 6 is don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try things. Our plants are much hardier and much more resilient than we give them credit for. I was recently listening to a lecture on what is botany by the University of Florida, and it's amazing what plants do to defend themselves, just their capabilities that honestly, to the naked eye, just looking at a plant, you would never know it's capable of doing. Like, I learned that tomato plants, for example, like if a tomato plant in your garden is under attack, be it a pest, be it fungal, whatever, it sends out a hormone to the other tomato plants within that vicinity that to like up their immunity. It's like wild to me in the grand scheme of things how resilient plants are. Yet when they're in our homes, we tend to baby them and coddle them, and quite honestly, they will do what they have to do to survive. Like, it is pretty incredible. So don't be afraid to take a cutting. Don't be afraid to repot. Yes, you can, like, yes, bad things can happen, right? Yes, you can put your plant into shock and it may not come out of it. There is some risk to that, but with risk comes learning, right? It comes potential reward. You know, you learn so much by taking those little risks. That's what I'm getting at. So don't be afraid to switch up a substrate or add something to your substrate. I love experimenting personally, and maybe because I am a curious person by nature, I've always been that kind of girl that will ask why. Like I was that kid growing up where it's like, well, why is the sky blue? Why is the sun so hot? You know, and so maybe that's part of it. But to be honest, nothing catastrophic has ever come really in the grand scheme of things from me just experimenting with my plants. With the exception of alocasia. Alocasia and I don't get along. Anytime I experiment with an alocasia, usually it goes awry, but outside of that, I've had pretty much good luck experimenting and playing with the plants. This helps me learn them. This helps in a lot of ways. Number 7 is to take cuttings. So this kind of goes into the experimentation of your plants. Maybe before experimenting, take a cutting. But anytime I see a plant that is potentially going south, or maybe it's starting to get leggy, there's so many reasons why you could propagate, but you could also look at it as insurance. So taking cuttings just sort of ensures that if something goes wrong with your mother plant, you do have a backup. And I can't say that I've necessarily learned that the hard way, because I guess, as I said before, I've always been curious and kind of experimenting all along throughout the journey. So propagation for me came pretty early in the game. But there's just a multitude of reasons why you would want to take cuttings, and I just want to encourage you to not be afraid to do so. I know in the beginning, like propagation, it's a little intimidating. Do a little research. I actually have a video concept in my mind that I would like to do upcoming just on some propagation tips, but definitely propagate. Take some cuttings. It's pretty fascinating to watch something grow from literally nothing and to know that you did that. So it's empowering. It's going to encourage you in your journey of growing plants. So taking cuttings is definitely a tip that, I don't know, I don't hear talked about enough as like a new beginner planty tip. Tip number 8 is to feed often. I feed with every water. When you think about it, you pot up your plant. That soil has a nutrient lifespan, if you will, of about 6 months. So if you're someone who's not really into the repotting process, or perhaps it's a plant that doesn't necessarily like to be repotted. I know, for example, for me personally, alocasias, Hoyas, anytime I seem to repot certain Hoyas especially, they tend to freak out. They just don't like it. They go into shock. So it's not something that I really like to do often. That being said, you still have to deliver the nutrients to the plant if it cannot get it itself. So I feed personally with every watering. I've experimented with several fertilizers at this stage of the game. I can't say that one works extraordinarily better than the others, but I have used just basic, like the Miracle Grow Blue powder, the tomato food. I've used that. I've used liquid versions. I've experimented with like adding myco and other things to my watering. All I can tell you is I've never had a bad experience with feeding every single week. In fact, quite the opposite. I find that my plants need it. They're waiting for it. So if you're someone who is afraid to fertilize, or perhaps you think it maybe isn't necessary, if you're not experiencing growth, if your plants aren't looking lustrous, perhaps it could be lack of nutrients. And I would try upping your fertilizer. I also will say that I don't use full strength every week. I use a diluted amount of feed every single week. So hopefully that helps, but don't be afraid to feed your plants. They're gonna love you for it. Number 9 is you do not need all of the gadgets. So in the beginning, when you're first starting out and you're doing all your research and you're going down your Google rabbit hole, if you will, of plant care and, you know, all the things plant related, you're going to probably be inundated by the amount of gadgets that are going to be sold to you in ways to better help care for your plants, all these things. Soil, moisture readers. I got one of those, the meter that tells you if it's dry. Gosh, what else did I buy into? I bought into a lot of the things, you guys, and all I can tell you is you really don't need them. You really don't. A chopstick will work as a moisture meter. You can always, you know, just dip that into the dirt. You don't have to go and buy all these things that they are going to push in front of you. I simply use 2 watering cans. This is the main one that I use. I think I picked this up at Walmart for maybe $8. I've had this going on 3 years now. It's held up really well. I know they have them on Amazon. I specifically like this one because of the long skinny spout. It makes it really easy to kind of get in and get around, especially if you have a lot of plants gathered in a corner. But it doesn't hold a ton of water. So I use let me just grab it. I use my green can. This is my main canteen. And this is what I fill from the water that I get outside that's been distilling. So if it's anything I can say spend your money on, it would be on good watering cans. A potting mat, I would say, is really, really helpful. That's something that I got later in the game that I wished I would have had sooner. You don't need all of the bug sprays and all of that. You can literally make a fantastic spray on your own, or if you're going to buy the store one, buy one that's like the concentrate that you can make your own. Not only is that great because you're repurposing bottles, but if you buy the concentrate, it's so much cheaper in the long run. This is my Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew that I mixed up myself, just using the concentrate. I'm trying to just think, I'm looking over in the corner here to see what I use regularly. As far as the homemade spray that I make, it's Castile soap. I can do maybe a small little clip on that, maybe a reel, show you how I make that. But I think it costs probably $35 or so in the beginning, but literally the Castile soap lasts forever. So it's like, in the long run, it's probably the most inexpensive way to sort of preventative care in terms of spider mites and pests. Gosh, what else, you guys? Really, yeah, a good set of clippers, alcohol, rubbing alcohol, peroxide, a couple good canteens. My watering process is a little bit complex, I guess, because I prefer to use distilled water. Essentially, we have a 5-gallon military canteen. It's either 3 or 5 gallons. That is outside. I fill that up from the hose. I then let that water sit for a few days to kind of leach out any of the chemicals, and then from there I will fill this green canteen. This is actually the canteen that I mix my fertilizer in, and then from here it goes into the small canteen and is ready to go for the rest of the watering. But I mean, those are really the main gadgets that I use. I just can't tell you enough how you do not need to go and buy all the things, especially in the beginning. Make sure you like the hobby first before you go and invest a bunch of money. Cloches are another thing that come in handy, but you can find those at the thrift stores. That's another tip. Look at thrift stores for your pots, for cloches, for vases, glassware, propagation vessels. A lot of that can be found super, super, super cheap at the thrift stores. I would just say take your time when it comes to acquiring your supplies, because if you do it that way, you can definitely do it much more affordably than just going out and getting all the things that in the grand scheme of things you don't even need. Number 10 is, it's just don't overcomplicate it. The hobby should be fun. You should be enjoying your time doing it. Don't stress out about it. I know that's easier said than done, and I can't say that there haven't been times that I've been stressed about it. So, but I am just saying, once it starts to become stressful, I feel like it's counterintuitive to why a lot of us are in the hobby to begin with. So keep in mind, our plants are very resilient. Keep it simple. There's a lot of advice out there on the internet, which can be super duper helpful. Just, I would say, use your discernment. When you're listening to some of the care tips, try to see how that would really actually work in your world. Meaning, is this something that you would really be willing to do to care for the plant? Is it something you think is really necessary? I think in the beginning, there's just so much to learn that it can be overwhelming. I just hate to see people overcomplicate something that shouldn't be stressful. It just should be fun, There is plenty of research out there that you can, if you run into pests, for example. I'll use an example of my first time getting thrips. My very first time getting thrips, you guys, I freaked out. I literally took every single plant in my home, took it to the shower, I sprayed everything down, and I repeated this process multiple times, and honestly, it wasn't necessary in the grand scheme of things. I think my fear of thrips just came from all of the information that I had been, listening to over the course of researching the hobby. So I think if a situation arises, be it a pest situation or a fungal situation, before you react, I would say take a step back, do a little bit of research on it, and decide for yourself what is the best course of action, what is going to be best for you, which is essentially what's going to be best for your plants. Because if you're running around frazzled and stressed out, you're going to find it overwhelming. You're not going to look forward to caring for your plants. You're going to view them as complicated. And so I think that's the whole point of the message, is to just keep it fun, keep it light. Nothing catastrophic is going to happen. Yeah. And I suppose my last tip, my bonus tip, is Facebook planty groups can be super helpful, and then they can be super not so helpful. And so what I mean by that is, when joining Facebook groups, use your discernment, check profiles, make sure you do your due diligence before buying anything off of Facebook groups, because there are a lot of scammers out there. I personally run a local planty group, and so I know of the scammers out there. I know that it can be a gold mine for scammers in terms of new plant parents, because maybe you aren't aware of the fact that the plant community, just like any community, there are scammers around. So just make sure you do your research before buying from just anyone, I'm always going to say to support your local growers, your local nurseries, your local licensed planty specialists, because they are going to know the most. They're going to be the ones that, I don't know. I really am very strong about supporting my local growers. So just use your discernment online. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. I hope you found this video helpful. I literally just took some notes and kind of listed them off for you. It wasn't overthought. It's just something I sat down on the couch and was like, you know, if I were talking to a brand new plant parent, what tips could I give them that would help them along their journey that maybe they've already been said before, but I really just wanted it to kind of come off as just us chatting, you know, as folks would do, and not so pushy or forced. So I hope you guys got something out of it. I wish you an amazing day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.